In this video, we'll take a look at ancient Greek beliefs and values. Democracy, philosophy, sculpture, drama, the Olympic Games. Many of the fundamental elements of Western culture first arose more than 2,000 years ago in ancient Greece. Ancient Greece and ancient Rome together are generally considered to be the birthplaces of what is conventionally known as Western civilization. Here's a map where the blue places are typically said to be Western. There's some debate about the lighter blue areas. What's meant by Western civilization or Western culture? As you can see, it's not merely a geographic label. So what is it that unites these places known as the West? Today, it's largely just a contrast to the Eastern world, that is, Asia, the Middle East, and Africa. But back to the Greeks and the Romans. After the Greeks, over here, were conquered by the Romans in 146 BCE, Greek ideas started to spread throughout this area, Rome's empire, much of which included Europe. But after the fall of the Roman Empire, these Greek ideas lost their influence in European society through what is called the Middle Ages. So this is a great oversimplified diagram of Western history where you have what's known as the classical period, 500 BCE to 500 CE. That's the height of Greek and Roman culture. But then everything starts to decline in what is called the medieval period or the Middle Ages. It lasted about 1,000 years. It's even known as the Dark Ages after the fall of Rome. And certainly Europe lagged behind on the outskirts of other great civilizations at the time. While Europe fell into the Dark Ages for 1,000 years, the rest of the Eurasian continent thrived. There were fabulous advanced civilizations in China, in India, in the Middle East, and in Africa, where the richest man in the world lived. And these areas were well connected by trade routes and cultural exchanges, and meanwhile, Europe sat off to the edges, off in the fringes, by itself, in relative backwardness. You'll study the greatness of all of these places in History 8. Okay, but then around 1450 or so, things took a turn for the better, for all kinds of reasons. I wonder if you can guess what happened around 1450 to 1500 that changed things for Europe. Well, Italy started to regain power, and many nations of Western Europe, Italy, France, Spain, Portugal, and the Netherlands are going to follow Italy's lead and rising up. It's called the Renaissance, which literally means rebirth. And this launched Western Europe to the front of the line for the first time, perhaps ever, in world history. And then we enter the modern age. From about 1800 and onward, it seems that the Western world has taken the lead, though some scholars say that period of Western dominance is soon to come to an end. So the Renaissance, this rebirth of Greek and Roman ideas, started in Italy, but moved out to the rest of northwestern Europe. And then as these places grew in power, they looked back to the ancients and started to claim the ancient Romans and the ancient Greeks as their ancestors. Maybe claiming to be the inheritors of the Greeks and the Romans makes sense for Italy, but it's a little weird for these countries up here in the Northwest because the Greeks didn't even know about those places. And though they had been conquered by Rome, most Romans saw them as a sideshow. Greeks and Romans had always focused their attention in the other direction, to the east instead. You can see that in this image of Roman emperors on coins. Notice all of them, with one exception, is focused towards the east. That's where the glory and the riches and the great history is, and that's where the Romans focused their energies. It's particularly weird for countries off to the edge up here, England, France, and the rest of Christian Western Europe, to claim to inherit the classical Greek culture, since Greeks were not Christians, that's for sure. And for centuries, while Western Europe over here fell into the Dark Ages, it was some non-Western civilizations who preserved and translated for us these ancient writings of Greek philosophers and scientists and thinkers. So it seems equally legitimate to say that Muslims in Fatimid Egypt, which was an empire in Egypt, or the Seljuk Empire, which was a Turkish empire, Muslim empire, seems legitimate to say that these people are legitimate inheritors of classical Greece and Rome. Why am I going on about this? Like, who deserves to claim their descendants from ancient Greece and Rome? Well, it bothers me that white supremacists, and here you have a very famous white supremacist, that they like to claim some association with ancient Greece and Rome. This is a famous Greek statue here. And that's some kind of proof of white greatness. It's a dangerous idea, and it really distorts history. Even today, there are hate groups that advertise these ideas. A group called Identity Europa, who makes posters saying, protect your heritage, or let's become great again. And they use ancient Greek and Roman imagery to promote their idea of white greatness. Greece and Rome didn't even think of themselves as white. And like I said, the same people that white supremacists often target, Muslims and other non-Westerners, those were the people who for centuries were the guardians and preservers of Greek and Roman ideas. But I'll stop. Back to the main point. What were these Greek ideas? In this unit, as we look at examples from Greek stories and art and architecture and philosophy, look for evidence of the following Greek beliefs and values. First, being curious, asking questions, having a constant sense of wonder, right? The great Greek philosopher Aristotle thought that curiosity was a uniquely defining property of human beings. It's what makes us as a species different from other living beings on the planet. And what are you curious about? Well, you're curious about the natural world. You're not going to just put all your focus towards what happens after you die and what's going to happen in heaven or whatever. You're going to be focused on the here and now, and you're really intensely curious about that. Secondly, the great Greek philosopher Socrates, who you see here, has a famous proverb that he discussed called "Know thyself." And he argued by this that people make themselves look kind of silly when they spend all their time trying to understand things like myths and gods and other irrelevant topics before they even fully know themselves. In other words, humans, we, are a worthy subject in and of ourselves. Next, the great Greek thinker Protagoras has a famous quote where he says, "Man is the measure of all things." So you could interpret this in a couple of ways. One, you could say each person, each individual man or woman must discern the truth for him or herself. Truth can be different for different people depending on their unique individual perspective and how they measure things, right? Or you can interpret it as a focus on humans and human potential, as opposed to a worldview that puts gods in the center. This glorification of the human form and human accomplishment is such a Greek way of thinking. Even the gods for the Greeks were created in the image of humans. They had human emotions, they looked like humans, they behaved more like people than what you might think of when you think of a god. The next Greek value or belief is this idea of personal agency. Let's just read this excerpt from a great book on Greek culture. It says that the Greeks, more than any other ancient peoples, and in fact, more than most people on the planet today, had a remarkable sense of personal agency. The sense that they were in charge of their own lives and free to act as they chose. One definition of happiness for the Greeks was that it consisted of being able to exercise their power in pursuit of excellence in a life free from constraints. Freedom, this idea that you can do what you want with your life. You can make what you will of yourself. That's personal agency. Now, I know that in Greek mythology, there's lots of stories about the fates, but they talked about that. They wrote stories about that because they resisted it. They didn't buy that idea, and Greek heroes are the people who challenge those fates. Speaking of Greek heroes, another great Greek belief or value is striving, making an effort. They strove for excellence and perfection and glory. Here you see the great Greek hero Achilles, who is a great personification of this idea of glory. Glory is the idea that you want recognition for your individual achievements. You don't want to just do great things but never get any recognition for it. You want everyone to celebrate you. The great Greek hero Achilles went off to fight in a war. His mother tried to prevent him from going because she knew about this story, this prophecy, that he was either going to live a long, peaceful, normal life and die peacefully as an old man, or he was going to do amazing things as a warrior. He would die young, but he would be remembered forever after with everlasting fame and glory. I wonder which of those you would choose. Greeks would definitely choose the latter. The next great Greek belief or value is this idea of using your brain, using logical reasoning and thinking. And this is the path to happiness. So it's not emotion, it's not prayer, it's none of these other ways of reaching the truth that maybe other cultures might pursue. For Greeks, it's going to be using your own mind. In fact, there's a Greek word, skole. That's where we get our own word school. But for Greeks, it meant fun. Right? So for Greeks, school was fun. The ancient Greeks wanted to know how the universe works, and they probed those questions by using their mind. They invented or perfected or pushed the limits of philosophy and mathematics and science. The last Greek belief or value I want to emphasize here is something called sophrosyne. It's this idea of balance, and especially balance and control of yourself. Moderation, taking a middle path, not going to excess in anything. Both the Greeks and the Romans are famous for this, right? Never being over emotional, always maintaining control over your faculties, right? So the Greeks and Romans are famous drinkers. They had wine. Even young babies would drink wine at every meal, wine for breakfast. But what people don't know is that they watered their wine. So it would be a little bit of wine, but a lot of water. And that's because it was considered culturally taboo to ever get drunk. You would lose control of yourself, and that is just embarrassing for you and for everyone around you. You're embarrassing yourself. So I will share this list with you so that you have it. You want to keep this front and center as we explore Greek art and architecture and philosophy. You're looking for evidence of these things